Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Pinot with Phoenix for July 2024. Hard to believe another space month is already in the books. So without any further ado, we've got a lot to jump into, so let's start recapping it all. First up, we'll start off with the first game of the month in Star Realms. In Star Realms by Wise Wizard Games, it's a space-themed deck builder where your goal is basically to reduce your opponent's authority to 0 before they can do the same to you. For the solo mode, we were taking on one of the challenges that Star Realms Frontiers gives us. We took on Madness of the Machines in this one, and we managed to take it out pretty easily. It definitely plays very quick, which I really enjoy in this game, and I do enjoy Star Realms immensely. Like I said, it's something I can pull out when I'm in the mood for something quick, and I really do like that about that. Anyway, I'm rambling about Star Realms now. Next up, let's talk about the 1991 playoffs in Payoff Pitch Baseball. When we came into the month, we'll tab over to, here we go. We were just starting the American League Championships. We were just starting the League Championship Series round with the Oakland Athletics and the Kansas City Royals in the American League, and the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Pittsburgh Pirates in the National League. As we can see, the Athletics defeated the Royals 4-2 in the American League Championship Series, and the Pirates defeated the Dodgers by a series score of 4-1. Kansas City made it to Game 6 by winning Games 4 and 5 before the A's finally took them down in Game 6 when it was looking like it was going to be Game 7 for a while there. As for the Dodgers, they won Game 4 before they ultimately lost in Game 5 to the Pirates. Then in the World Series, the Pirates actually defeated the Athletics by a final series score of 4-2, outscoring. Let me turn my mic down. Hang on just a second. And I think that's where it's going to be about good. Okay. So the Pirates actually became the only team in the replay to win a series after losing Game 1. The Pirates went down 1-0 to the A's, then went down 2-1 again, and came back to win 3 straight, outscoring the A's by a score of 40-10 in the final 3 games of the series to win the 91 World Series. Then during stream testing, we came out with the Pirates again, as they were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers in a 1986 matchup. The Pirates weren't as fortunate in that one, where the Pirates lost to the Dodgers by a final score of 7-3. So in a measure of retribution for the National League Championship Series, the Dodgers did pull that game out. I do still really enjoy Payoff Pitch. It feels like it's very straightforward. Now, granted, that could be the fact that I just spent the last 3+ months playing Payoff Pitch, but there is that kind of feeling as well. There's that feeling of this feels very straightforward, where it was making a lot of sense. And I think part of that, too, was just leaning on the fast action cards as hard as I did, for as much as I was able to in that game. But that's enough about Payoff Pitch. Now let's move to game number 6 on my Tack Up Wargaming list, as we played Space Empires 4X by GMT Games. This one has you building up your space civilization, trying to defeat the Doomsday Machines in the solo mode. You could also be dealing with the other players in a multiplayer game. This one we also lost by the skin of our teeth. We took out 2 of the Doomsday Machines, but the third one proved to be a little bit too much for us. I do really enjoy this game as well, and I definitely need to pull out the expansions for it at some point. I really like kind of the economic focus in it, where you're building up your forces, and it gives you just enough of that tactical itch where if you're in the mood for a tactical game, this is definitely a more operational level than tactical, but there is enough tactical action here to really help you scratch that itch. And one decision that I made that came back to haunt me in that game was defending Vortigern as far forward as I did. I probably should have pulled back and let Vortigern go by the wayside in that one. But that's just the risk you take in that game. That's it for Space Empires. Next up, we had our lone debut on the channel. I'm just double checking it. This is our lone debut on the channel, as we played Astronauts from Indie Boards and Cards, which very much felt like Aeon's End in space, and I was heavily leaning into that fact to help me learn this game, especially because this was also the very first time I'd played it. I had unboxed Astro Knights on the channel, but I hadn't had a chance to get it out. Although once I started hearing more about, okay, this is basically Aeon's End in space with some slight rules differences, I figured that would give me an easy time with picking this one up. And it seems to, aside from missing one card that Jester was kind enough to point out in a comment on the video. And I'm already starting to pull in some of the pick up some of the expansions for that one as well. I've got the Orion System expansion, and then there's Eternity, which is another base game. Hold on a second, let me go on Do Not Disturb on my phone. There we go. There's also Eternity, and I think that had another expansion or two as well. I've got that as well in the collection. I may do an unboxing on that at some point, but that remains to be seen. Anyway, that's it for Aeon's End. Now let's move into our next game of the month, which was Twilight Inscription by Fantasy Flight, which is a game that's set in the Twilight Imperium universe using a roll and write system where you've got 4 sheets of dry erase paper that you're managing for whatever civilization you play, and you're trying to, similar to Space Empires, you're trying to develop your civilization to defeat an Automa opponent. This one's a lot more 10,000 foot view, I think, than Space Empires is, where you've really got the high level management of everything, but you don't necessarily get the tactical feeling of moving your pieces on the map. There's just, like I said, it's a 10,000 foot view, but I do enjoy this game as well, because it does feel like Twilight Imperium, but in a much more manageable time frame. And for this one, we actually managed to score very high in this one. We picked up 83 points, which I believe is Galactic Power. We were playing on easy difficulty, so I forget what the actual difficulty breakdown is there, what the actual score breakdown is there, but that's what sounds about right for me on that. Anyway, that's it for Twilight Inscription. After that, I came back to our solar system for a couple games, and first up we played Space Corp 2025 to 2300 from GMT Games. So Space Corp is a game that's set in a more advanced solar system where civilizations have gotten more spacefaring, and now we're exploring the limits of our solar system and eventually out into the galaxy and deeper into the known universe. I played through the first 2 eras in this one for the month. I haven't really done too much with the 3rd era, but I think the 3rd era feels like it's got a little bit of bloat to it that I don't think it really needs. And the nice thing I like about this game is you can actually pick it up in any era, so I could theoretically start in Era 2 if I wanted to, or just play through Era 1 if I wanted a good Wednesday game. So this is one of those games that I think kind of straddles the line in terms of, okay, do I want a weeknight game, or do I want a Sunday game? And depending on what day I put it on the calendar, I can very easily go into either one, like I said, just by varying how many eras I go through. All 3 would definitely be a Sunday game, no doubt about that. But if I go for 1, I could probably fit that on a weeknight. 2 seems to be hovering the edge of... 2 seems to be right on the edge, leaning a little bit towards Sunday content, but I could definitely fit it in. I could probably fit it in on Wednesday content if I knew I had Thursday off and I could use the extra time there. Or if I want to put this on in December, I could also, that's another spot I could go with it. But that's enough rambling on Space Corp. Next up, still in our solar system, we played Terraforming Mars, the dice game. This is a game set in the Terraforming Mars universe where, just like the name suggests, your goal in this one is to terraform Mars. This time you're using dice to do that. And I've talked about before my feelings on dice games depending on what the dice are actually doing. Where if the dice are your resources, I don't like that game. I don't like a game like that as much. Whereas if the dice are serving more as your resources, that I'm a little bit warmer to. I think I talked about that again with D-Day Dice last month, where the dice in that game filled a weird hybrid for me, where it kind of controlled both your resources, but they were also your actions because you needed resources to be able to advance in a way. So in that regard, I didn't really like D-Day Dice. Terraforming Mars, the dice game, though, I do like this one, because it leans more toward being your resources than necessarily your actions. And like I said, those types of games I'm a lot warmer to. As far as how we did in this one, we actually managed to terraform Mars by the skin of our teeth. It was very close. It was looking like we weren't going to get there, but in our very last turn of the game, I think we were able to pull it off. We had to go through, I want to say, a couple of terraforming actions to get that done. It ended up being a fairly low VP game, but I do still really enjoy this one. And I think I've talked about this before, but if I had to rank the 3 games, I'd say Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition would be probably my favorite Terraforming Mars game. Then Terraforming Mars the Dice game, which I think makes a good entry point to the universe. And then Base Terraforming Mars, which to me felt like it was too much. There was just too much to worry about there. And that's a theme we're going to come back to in a little bit. But next up in Space Month, we had a visit to the Terra Mystica universe in Gaia Project, where you're building up your civilization once again in the Terra Mystica universe. We took the Geodens out for this one against the Taclons, and it wasn't even close. We had a brief flirtation of, hey, maybe Phoenix Knight's going to have to move to Alaska and become Eskimo Knight, but it wasn't a close game, and that was the only way I was going to be thinking about even moving to Alaska and becoming Eskimo Knight. It was not a close game, and I still really enjoy this one again. It's another economic-focused one that I really like. So that's it for Gaia Project, which actually was the last space game for the month, because after that, our attention actually started turning in a couple of other different directions. But the most important direction we turned was the 2024 Summer of Lovecraft, and to get there, on Monday night, we played Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu by Z-Man Games. Our goal in this one is to close gates in the 4 major cities in the Cthulhu mythos, those being Arkham, Dunwich, Innsmouth, and Kingsport. Now, in this game, I wasn't necessarily prioritizing the win in this one as much as I wanted the opponent for the Summer of Lovecraft. And the way I was determining that is whichever ancient one was the last one to wake up when the game ended, however it ended, that was going to be our opponent for the Summer of Lovecraft. We did lose a close one here. We did have everything we needed to seal Kingsport, but we just ran out of cultists on the board. And when we ran out of cultists on the board, Azathoth was our last ancient one awakened, and actually Azathoth was a big reason why we got stuck with losing that game, because he took 3 cultists off the board, which means we had to babysit cultists a little more than usual, and they were out around where we couldn't get to them. So that's how we ended up losing the game, and that's how we got Azathoth as our opponent for the 2024 Summer of Lovecraft. That's it for Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. Now, we did spend some more time in the baseball world as well. I was doing some more stream testing since I did pick up a laptop in the mid to late July. So I was playing around with getting all that set up for stream testing and potentially adding streaming to the channel. And we're going to come back to that as well. First up on the stream testing, we actually went to an old favorite in Season Ticket Baseball. Season Ticket Baseball is by Sports Mogul Incorporated and, yes, Baseball Simulator. For this one, we went to 1993 as the Toronto Blue Jays took on the Chicago White Sox. The Blue Jays won this one 2-1. For me, this one felt very straightforward, where you're basically rolling your dice almost APA style, where you have a D6 and two D10s. I was using D percentile dice just to make my life easier on that front. Where you read them as the D6, then whatever you're reading as your 10s, then your 1s. And you get a result from either the pitcher or batter card, stadium card, or potentially a fielder, or you might have rare plays come in via the 5 rolls. Like I said, it feels very straightforward to me, and I really enjoy this game, especially with the stadium coming into this game. And this is our first stream game, which brought technical testing underway. Next up on the baseball stream testing, we went to APA Baseball. For this one, we went to 2005, playing the Milwaukee Brewers at the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies won this one 4-2 on a walk-off 2-run homer. I definitely enjoy the simplicity of this one. I don't like as much that the stadium is absent from this game, but I think I can trade that for the simplicity. And I do like it doesn't really have too much narrative either, but I feel like narrative for me, and I'm starting to understand this a little more, narrative is a little bit easier of a blank for me to fill in now that I'm starting to play more of these baseball games, where now it's like, okay, now I can imagine, say, base hit into left field, or base hit drops in front of the right fielder, or a dribbler gets past short, whatever, something like that. And I think a lot of that is just all the time I've been spending with the fast action cards and payoff pitch baseball. So it's definitely a trade in simplicity for narrative with APA. And we're going to come back to that fact with our next game, which actually is actually our last game for the, well, not necessarily our last game for the month, but one of our last distinct games for the month as we played Inside Pitch Baseball. Before I talk about that, I'm going to take a quick drink. Inside Pitch Baseball is by Inside Sports Games. Again, baseball simulator. For this one, we went back to 2011 and had a matchup between the Boston Red Sox and the Kansas City Royals. The Royals won this one 7-3. Now, Inside Pitch is starting to turn into a weird one for me, because I really enjoy the narrative in this game, but the complexity just absolutely drove me nuts. And I think if you were tuning in for the stream on Sunday, you saw where my frustration got the better of me in that one, where I was having problems with the rules constantly, and it was just driving me nuts to the point where, and I'm going to come back to this as well, I'm having some thoughts about my 1985 season replay that's going to start on January 1st. But if I had to rank my baseball simulators coming out of the stream testing week, I think my 1 and 1A right now would be some combination of season ticket and payoff pitch. Which one is 1 and which one's 1A would really almost depends on the day sometimes. But if I had to pick right now, I'd probably lean very, very, very slightly to payoff pitch as my number 1 over season ticket. My number 3 right now would probably be APA baseball, just because the cost scares the hell out of me on that one. But I do like the simplicity, and I do like being able to kind of fill in the blanks of the narrative myself, where again, the ball's being hit to, let's say, it's being hit past second, or it's smacked into center field, or it's going boom over the left field fence. Sometimes I kind of like being able to imagine that a little bit more. And then my number 4 right now is Inside Pitch, where I like the narrative in that one, but good grief, it is so complicated to learn. And I think a lot of the problems I was having was, believe it or not, with the error aspect. The base running seemed to be making a little bit more sense to me, but the error aspect of it was definitely driving me nuts. So I think right now I'm at a point where I'm starting to initiate what I call an Inside Pitch purge, where I'm starting to swap some of my seasons in Inside Pitch into other systems. So that's kind of where I'm going there right now. I'm actually going to pull up something else that I'm going to need here very soon. But that's kind of where things are at. I've already started that a little bit with some of the seasons that I've bought in season ticket, and I bought a couple more in payoff pitch. I'm getting ready to order season in APA and Strat as well. I'm looking at other systems, but I'm kind of trying to keep my collection between the 1970 and 2019 as far as the seasons go. Even within there are a few Inside Pitch seasons that I can definitely swap out. So keep an eye on that starting to happen over the next few months or so. But that's it for the games for the month. Next up, let's go into Mystical Munchies. For Mystical Munchies this month, we were cooking out of the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Black Spire Outpost Cookbook. Here's what we cooked and my thoughts on each recipe. For the appetizer, we made Cat's Kettle Corn. It wasn't a difficult recipe necessarily. It did turn out slightly burned, but otherwise it tasted good. And this is one you can easily doctor up, where if you want to add, say, like almonds or something to this, it's definitely easy to add stuff to this recipe to make your own kind of flavor of kettle corn. So definitely with the recipes, make them your own. As always, the links are provided in the description of every video. Next up we had the side, which was roasted kajaka root. This was basically decorated sweet potatoes with yogurt and whatever toppings you have on handy. The recipe turned out fine. Again, I've never been the biggest fan of sweet potatoes in the world. I like sweet potato casserole, but I don't like sweet potatoes in a more raw form like that, like they were in this recipe. And it tasted fine hot or cold, nothing I was going to keep. I was thinking about maybe bringing these into work and sharing them with my coworkers, but too much of a mess, I figured. And they don't seem like they're going to travel very well. For the entree, we made fried Andorian tip yip, which looked to be fried chicken in mashed potatoes and mixed veggies. The recipe did turn out fine, but I did have some problems with the herbs. They didn't seem to break up enough in the food processor, and I think a And I think an immersion blender probably would have helped me on that recipe, helped me break up the herbs a bit more, so I wasn't picking out so much of the herbs as they got cut up in there. The highlight of that recipe was actually getting the Cthulhu Death May Die giant Cthulhu statue with the Relay Rising episode in it, so looking forward to getting that out at some point. As for the dessert, we made Zoochberry Surprise, which looked to be like a chocolate cheesecake recipe. Well, a fruit-flavored cheesecake on a chocolate graham cracker crust. This turned out really good, and we actually have an AMA question about that, but we'll come back to that a little bit. Actually, we'll be coming back to that very shortly here. That's it for Mystical Munchies, so next up, let's go through Ask Me Anything. Now, in terms of how you get a question on for the Ask Me Anything segment, the way you do that is you leave a comment in any video between this recap and the last video for the month, and I'll try to announce that when we get closer with an AMA tag in the question, so I'll know it's for this segment, and we do have a few AMA questions this month. So as we'll tab over here, all of our questions are coming from Jester this month. His first actually is in Space Corp. He had 3 different AMA questions, so we're going to take them one at a time. First up, thoughts with the 1991 season replay over. I'm still definitely getting used to being in an off season right now, because the off season is going to be very long in this coming out of this first replay. I really enjoyed watching the story unfold of the standings as the replay took shape. So there was definitely a story aspect to that replay, or to that kind of a project that I really like to dig into. So I do see myself doing more of these replays. As I've mentioned before, my next replay is going to start in January, and I'm going to use my executive pick for the winter seasons I'm going to use my executive pick for the winter seasons to cross off my birth year and do 1985 next. So, welcome in, Jester. I see you're joining in here at about the midway point. And then your next question was about streaming, same or different. We're going to come back to streaming on that one. I'm going to punt on that one slightly because that is a special topic that I want to talk about this month. As for what I learned to make my next replay better, I do think streaming kind of helped me out with that in several ways, where it's helping me with the schedule, where I think I can make my block lengths a little bit shorter in exchange for playing more often. But I think my biggest takeaway from streaming so far has been figuring out how to record what I call those flowy videos. I've talked about this before, but the way you can tell my flowy videos versus my more camera cutty videos is when I say I need to take a small break in the middle of a video, that's generally more indicative of a flowy video, because what I've learned with my A6000 camera is it likes to stay on, at least when battery powered, continuously for about 20 or so minutes, and then I have to shut the camera off. That's what I mean by I need to take a small break. So hopefully that'll make more sense, and that we'll talk more about that when we get into the actual special topic of streaming. And then on Mystical Munchies for the Zoochberry Surprise, Jester was asking if this was the best thing I've made on Mystical Munchies so far, but if not this, then what? I think, honestly, this probably is one of the better recipes that I've made, just because it's kind of crossed off a bucket list experience for me, where I've always liked having cheesecake, but I'd never made it for myself. So this was a first-time experience for me in making cheesecake. And yes, it's a lot of work, but the reward is oh so worth it. Definitely not a travel recipe, though, that's for sure. So that's it for Ask Me Anything. Let's bring it back up top. As I mentioned, I do have a special topic that I want to talk about this month. And if you're a regular follower on the channel, you're noticing more streams popping up on the channel, thanks to my new laptop and getting that all set up. So let's talk about the future of streaming on the channel. First, I'll take a quick drink. Much better. So when it came to this special topic, I went through a couple of different iterations of this. Coming into the week, I was all set to talk about how, okay, streaming went great. Now I'm going to start setting up, okay, what's going to make good streaming content versus what's not going to make good streaming content. Then my debacle of Sunday's Inside Pitch stream happened, and I kind of went, almost the other direction of, okay, I'm going to junk streaming altogether. But then coming out of my payoff pitch stream on Tuesday, now I'm kind of back to the middle of, okay, I think streaming can work here, but I definitely need to take some time with it and figure things out on that aspect. So, one thing I will mention that was going to be common in whatever iteration of this special segment that I talked about, I'm not suddenly going to turn into a full-time streaming channel. I am still going to divide my content into what makes good streaming content versus what doesn't make good streaming content. And as I mentioned, what makes good streaming content is when I say I need to take a small break. Because that'll be easy to set up my continuous camera and say, okay, we can just record that all the way through. As far as what makes bad streaming content is concerned, the more camera cuts I use when I'm making some of my videos, the less I'm going to want to use a game as streaming content. So pretty much anything in the Arkham Horror files is out as streaming content, because there's a lot of information that I need to share around on that, and the camera's moving around like crazy. So especially in the card game where you'll hear, okay, we need to move down to so-and-so's play area, or we need to move over to the map, or let's move back up top for the upkeep phase. If I'm saying let's move in a video, that's where you can probably figure, okay, this isn't going to make good streaming content at all. And the same thing for the Summer of Lovecraft. You're not going to see any of those games on as streaming content. And I don't think Sunday when I film, at least the Sunday morning content, really isn't going to make good streaming content anyway, because most of the time I'm filming so early on Sunday morning. A lot of people are still going to be at church before that early on a Sunday morning. I don't have that problem because I figure, hey, getting that close to a church, I would probably spontaneously combust into flames. But that's another story. Whereas the Sunday afternoon, evening streams probably are a little bit better for that. So that's kind of my ramble on streaming. I definitely have had a lot better luck with the technicals on YouTube than I ever did on Twitch. And I think a lot of that is just inheriting more than a little of my mother's stubborn streak in figuring out how to make my Sony camera work as my streaming webcam. So that's it for streaming in general. Now let's go back over to baseball streaming in particular for a second. So I've talked about my 1985 season replay. That was only going to be I was originally set up to be an inside pitch. But after Sunday's inside pitch stream, I would say I'm about 90% of the way to switching that over to season ticket. I've got the stadiums printed, and those need to be put into their sheet protectors to go into a binder. I also need to print, cut, and sort the players out. But I think once I do that and cut the logos, I'm probably going to move that replay into season ticket. So, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm starting to move some of my inside pitch seasons off into other systems. Streaming all the time, well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm finding, is that it doesn't work all the time for everybody and for every situation. That's what I'm talking about at least for my games, the games that make good content versus what doesn't. So that's kind of my ramble on that. The more camera cuts I use, the less I want to use it for streaming content. What do I use to keep? What am I going to use to keep stats and ratings? Generally, I'm not going to worry about keeping stats until I get into the World Series, because I name a World Series MVP, but I don't worry about like your Cy Youngs, your Golden Gloves, stuff like that. So I'm only going to worry about that when I get to the World Series. But when I get there, I was thinking about using Digital Diamond, because that's what I use to put together my lineups for the playoffs. But I'm probably going to be in the business and looking for a new stat keeping software, something like Diamond Mine or Action PC Baseball, maybe something like that. So I'm definitely open for other programs on that, because I know you don't, from the sounds of it, you don't have a lot of love lost for Digital Diamond coming out of one of your season ticket replays, but I'm getting rambly on that. What season is that? Yes, that is going to be 1985 that I'm planning my next replay to be in, starting in January. Replay Baseball has the 1985 season. I've looked off and on at 1985, or not at 1985, at Replay Baseball, but I kind of hesitated on that because the way it seems like it works is you have to pay for the program, and then you pay again for each individual season. The main reason I got Digital Diamond at first was because I wanted something that had a ton of seasons that got a lot of seasons in one shot. So I'm kind of hesitating on what I do as far as picking up Replay Baseball or Diamond Mine or other programs like that. But I'll definitely take a look at. Let me make a note here so I don't forget. Let's see. Look again at Replay Baseball. This is probably going to sound weird, but next time you do a baseball stream, would you mind doing one with a little more focus on Replay Baseball so I can see how that works? Like I said, I do want to look into that, but I'm not sure what stat program I'm going to go with on that. Like I said, my hesitation with Replay, $25 per season and $50 for the program. That's the thing that's making me hesitate around picking up Replay Baseball, is that cost per season is what's giving me pause about that. So I will also want to see as far as how it handles transactions, because that was the other problem I had with Digital Diamond when I was making the playoff rosters. It was based on mid-season. It was essentially based on start of season rosters. I had to ask in one of my Facebook groups how to put together rosters based on the actual end of season transactions, which it sounds like you can do in Digital Diamond without having to play through the entire season, but it seemed like it was very convoluted to do that. Don't replay baseball. You just use the program to score and keep track of what you're playing. Okay, that's actually probably a little bit better. See, where you wouldn't have to play everything through. I'd be curious to know about how it handles transactions, though. But that's enough about the. I think that's enough about the rambly. Well, I'll definitely entertain other comments on that, but I do want to move along here a little bit and talk about what's coming in August. So August is Mythos month on the channel and has been for the last 2 years. That tradition is going to continue this year. In one of our last games in July, as I mentioned in the game recap, we had the play-in game for the 2024 Summer of Lovecraft, and our opponent this year for the Summer of Lovecraft is Azathoth. For the first 3 Sundays in the month, we're going to have the aforementioned Summer of Lovecraft as we play Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, and Elder Sign. For those of you who have never been around for either the Summer of Lovecraft or the Christmas in Arkham, which is the December version of this campaign, the Summer of Lovecraft is basically a mini campaign game where we're going to take the same team of investigators as long as they can go, and we're going to play them through all 3 games in that campaign. If we win each game, we're going to start with an extra item, which we'll roll for at the start of the game. But if we lose, normally we'd start down 1 health and 1 sanity. I'm going to get a little spoilerific on this one and say that instead of our normal loss penalties, that having to swap all of our investigators out is going to be enough, because what happens when Azathoth wakes up in every game is he'll destroy the entire world. So I'm getting slightly spoilerific, but I have to explain why one of my normal house rules isn't going to be a part of this. Okay, Replay Baseball has all transactions and lists every player that was in the lineup. Okay, cool. And can do a tutorial overview. Cool. So hopefully I'll get a chance to take a look at that before January, and I need to get everything ready for the night. Well, I'm probably going to be wanting to get everything ready. In about, I would say October, I'm probably going to start getting everything ready for 1985. Coming back to what's coming. So thanks for the tutorial overview on Replay Baseball. As for the last Sunday of the month, we're going to have game number 7 on my TACUP Wargaming list as we play Warfighter World War II Pacific. Now, you may be thinking that scheduling World War II Pacific, Warfighter World War II Pacific here was an accident, but give me a little more credit than that. Neither schedule placement nor setting was an accident, but you'll have to trust me on that. People who are into Warfighter and know this month will probably be able to guess how everything's going to fit together. As for Wednesdays in the month, we're going to let Call of Cthulhu take center stage once again. We're going to go on several adventures this month in the Call of Cthulhu universe. We're going to find ourselves alone against the flames, then the dark, then the tide, and finally against the static. We'll be alone against the dark and the static for the first time on the channel. As for Mystical Munchies this month, we're going to have our first fully board game themed cookbook as we feature the Ticket to Ride official cookbook. We'll be cooking cheese crisps, wild berry salad, Chicago-style deep dish pizza, peaches and cream crisp, and as we have 5 Saturdays in the month, we also need a drink, so we'll be making a root beer float. With that, let's go ahead and wrap this video up, aside from other chat questions. That's the table set for another month on the channel, and an end to Pinot with Phoenix for July 2024. Saturday, we'll start Mystical Munchies out of the Ticket to Ride cookbook with the appetizer, cheese crisps. Sunday, we'll have the first leg of the 2024 Summer of Lovecraft as we play Eldritch Horror. And Wednesday, we're going to have our first Call of Cthulhu adventure as we find ourselves alone against the flames. Ticket to Ride cookbook. So funny that they have one of them. You'd be surprised at a lot of the properties that have cookbooks, that have official cookbooks. There were some that I picked up that I was like, wait, this has a cookbook? Like Halo, Marvel even kind of surprised me a little bit that it has a cookbook. And again, definitely Ticket to Ride was kind of a surprise. Well, I guess Ticket to Ride isn't necessarily a big surprise just because you're kind of traveling around. So it makes sense with the various locations in the game that you'd have themed recipes from each of the locations as you visit them. But I'm getting rambly on this one. As for Pinot with Phoenix July 2024, thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.